Hello everybody, I'm Solomon, and here is a big congratulations to the anniversary of the Singapore Flower Club. And I'm here doing a demonstration on behalf of the Hong Kong Flower Club, and I've prepared two pieces. This time of the year is almost spring, and it's almost like April and May, and so I've prepared something that is slightly spring and slightly reminds us of our area. So it's orchids that I'll be using, and then I'll be also using some kind of bluebells here, bluebells, scillas. And this is for me, you know, European spring, and then the orchids is obviously very Singapore and very Southeast Asia. So I'll be doing this piece, trying to marry the two different materials here. As you can see, I have prepared this vase. This vase is like a modern interpretation of the tulip vase. The tulip vase was one of the more interesting kind of invention by the Dutch around, like, you know, the golden age, when they were all crazy about tulips. And this one that we have here is like a modern interpretation. You can see that it's slightly gnarled, and it's almost like a coral with all this different chimneys coming out. And I think just this vase on its own is quite visually enticing, visually interesting, visually engaging, and trying to design something that is to match this particular vessel is also a interesting experience, as well as quite a challenge, I think. So I decided to use this vase to do this piece of demonstration. In terms of flowers, like I've said before, I've used this scilla or bluebells, which a lot of people, if you've been to Europe or anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere around this time of year, you see them completely carpeted in any woodland floors. And so bluebells comes in all sorts of different colors, and today I've chosen this slightly lilac and slightly blue variety. As well as that, there are lady slippers orchids, which I think, you know, for me is very tropical, and I really do love orchids. And on top of that, we have some of these really striking mini anthurium, as well as these blood red ones. So not too much of materials if you're designing in terms of Western style or modern style, but I think all the materials chosen here are all very visually significant as well as striking on their own. Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to put in the scilla first, and then later on I'll put in the orchids, and finally I'll put in the anthurium. I discovered that these scillas are actually very soft. It's not as soft as tulips, but they're very malleable. For me, it's one of the first plants that I've ever grown when I was in the UK. And so for me, it's actually quite a interesting as well as significant plant that really reminds me of where I started. And so I've chosen this plant to do something and do some design with it. And you see, I'm actually joining the two of the vessels, like two of the barnacles, the holes of them, using these lines of the scillas, trying to create some kind of movement and trying to create some kind of visual interest. And by way of knotting the scillas together, I think I'll be creating a lot of movements as well as curved lines, which are in stark contrast to the immense, like almost heavy base of the container. So whenever we're doing something like that, you know, it's always interesting to look at how you can navigate through a container, either via repetition or either via contrast. I think these basic design elements and principles are very useful, you know, wherever you are, whatever container you're using and whatever flowers that you're using. It's actually very simple. This is a home decoration piece, if you like. And you can also expand it into different area, such as table centerpieces, as well as reception centerpieces, anything that you would like to add some kind of movement, or anything that you want to create some kind of contrast or interesting textures. So this is a very interesting way of using this material, especially when the season of the bluebells are not very long. So we know that, you know, after bluebell comes the peony, and it really is a blessing to be a florist, because we get to witness the changing of the seasons almost by the week. If you miss the bluebells, or if you miss the daffodils, you know, you always have something new to look forward to. So life moves on. So here I've got this other sets of bluebells. You can do as many as you want, or as little as you want, you know, depending on the effect that you would like to achieve. And here I am. I think I'll save these few just in case that I might need some more later on. Maybe one more here. So you can see the effect is this, you know, just coming out from the tulip vase. Each of the holes of the vessels are now connected via the curved lines, via the curves of these scilla and bluebells. And now what I'm going to add is that I'm just going to pick out the color of these purple bluebells and the slight magenta, slight blueness of it, and insert these lady slippers orchids into the individual holes. I really think that this is a nice combination, you know, although this combination is not the most usual. It's slightly modern in its interpretation because it completely disregards its natural habitat. It's more based on a poetic interpretation, but I think it's visually interesting, and it's visually stimulating when we mix and match or juxtapose certain amount of colors, forms, shapes, as well as texture. So here it is. I'll add a few more just to give it the grouping as well as depth and the three-dimensionality of the entire composition. All these space are necessary. I think when we are arranging something, when we are arranging flowers in a container such as this, we really do need to create a lot of space so that it opens up the entire composition. And the looping of the bluebells actually helps a lot to navigate, to bring our eyes to navigate from one orchid to another, so as to reinforce the visual dynamic of the entire composition. Okay, and you see I'm enjoying myself too, you know, because these things are so personal and so simple, and it's such a joy to work with flowers. Something like that. I think maybe this one's slightly shorter. Like, talking about the essence of flower arranging, you know, I really think that it's all about how you interpret your subject matter. It's almost like poetry. You do need to learn all the techniques, of course, you know, all the wiring and everything. It's just like when we're learning poetry, at least we need to know the language first before we write poems, right? So whether you want to stay on the level of technicality, like about wiring, doing something that is more crafting a level, or do you want to express yourself as a poet, you know, it really depends on your objective. And in this case, you know, I just want to express myself, trying to exercise, or maybe trying to navigate between different elements of designs and different elements of each of the plant materials that I'm using here. And So I'm just gonna add in this blood red anthurium, just to give it a little bit of focal area. I really do like this color because somehow all these materials that I'm using here seems to be very unlikely combination, but somehow they do work. And it's this juxtaposition of material and colors and textures that is my inspiration. I really do like to experiment with new combinations of things and new combination of shapes, as well as colors, as well as space. And as you can see, you know, anthuriums are quite popular now, mixing in with more soft flowers like peonies and carnations. So why not just try it? You know, there is no nothing's absolute until you try it. You really need to experiment. And finally, I'm adding the rest of this, and I think that will be done. Finally, let me turn it around for you to see. So it's a rather 3D arrangement that fits either on the table, maybe on the coffee table, or maybe in an art gallery, or a restaurant, or simply a home with love. There you go. So this is my first piece. Simple tulip vase with unlikely material of bluebells, lady slipper orchids, as well as anthurium. Now, when it comes to the second piece, I've chosen another container that is rather interesting. And this one is a completely steel container that I bought when I was in an art fair in London. And you see that it has this somehow like a Bauhaus appeal to it. It's very geometric, and it's almost like an industrial shape, almost, how can we say, it's very Bauhaus, very industrial, as well as very raw and full of texture. So I've chosen this. And in contrast, the flower material that I'm going to use is extremely dainty and extremely delicate, just to contrast this sturdiness and masculinity of this container. And the one that I've chosen to use is this lily of the valley and convallaria, and this is a very, very interesting and fragrant, again, it's a spring flower. But in order to make it kind of gel together, rather than exemplifying the stark contrast between the ultimate delicate flowers and the very masculine vase, I've also incorporated something that is very unlikely, and that's what we're having here. These are actually dried sweet pea vine, Lataris. This is the vine of the sweet peas, and I'm going to insert into it, and then I'm going to insert the lilies of the valleys into it, and so that it has somewhat of a transition, although the transition is rather odd. I really enjoy this kind of the juxtaposition of material, like I've said before. Also, what I'm going to use are a series of these drift branches, so that it has this woodland come seashore come industrial wasteland kind of a mixture. Now, when we start, we try to find a front side of the container, and I think the front side should be something that shows more of the angles, so I choose this side. So this side is my front, or you can just basically use any sides, you know, any sides that you thought that is suitable for you. And then you see this Lataris is, these are the stem, and these are where the flower's been cut. And the whole thing has been hung dry. Actually, it's not bleached, it's just naturally dried, so it's quite brittle. But I think, you know, as a mechanics, it works really well because it has this interesting tendril as well. So what we're going to do is just that we're just going to insert it into the container like so and dry, and the container has no water at the moment, and we won't want to sort of like make it wet so that it's the dried flower will get messy or mushy. And we just put in all of these bits and pieces of dried Lataris first. And already you can see that, you know, although it's getting everywhere because it's really dry and brittle, but you can already see the contrast between the solid metal and the dry filigree and tendril of the Lataris branches. So we're just going to add in a little bit more here. It's actually a product that you can buy, but I actually dried them myself, and I think it's actually quite interesting to use all parts of the plants rather than just using the flowers. There are actually these little flowers here that reminds you of what it is. There are actually flowers on it that are dried, as well as little pea pods on it as well. Lataris, sweet peas, you know, the smell, the scent of it, you know, really reminds me of spring and summer in Europe, or maybe in parts of America. Also in Japan, or maybe somewhere, you know, slightly more temperate. It actually is one of what we call cut and grow again plant, because the more you cut, the more it flowers. So you get to enjoy this wonderful scented plant all through summer until autumn hits you like a brick wall. So just basically arrange it quite casually into the container first, and let me clear up this remaining bits on the table, and we will assess what we've done so far. Okay, so far basically lines, chaos, but an orderly chaos. Okay, so it should be viewed this way. And then we're just going to insert some of the driftwood. The driftwood should be able to be jammed in between the twigs that we've just put in, just to add in a certain richness of texture into it, so that we get to have a real big contrast of texture later on when we add in the lily of the valley. Put in a little bit more. Industrial versus natural. So I think I finished with my driftwood, and the next step is just to add in the flowers. Now this is what we can say is like a structure, but it's more like a dry arrangement, you know. But we're not using any oasis because the flowers for the lily of the valleys are too delicate to be put in oasis, so we'll be using some of these water tubes. But if you put water tubes into this container, because it's very deep, it will just slide down, maybe fall down into the container. So what I've discovered is that there are now these nano tapes that you can buy. It's like a nano double-sided tape, which are rather thick like this. And the beauty of this thing is that you can remove it from almost any surface other than a painted wall. So metal, mirror, glass, anything, you can just put these nano tapes on, and it's ultra sticky, and it's perfect, especially when you're trying to glue something or stick something onto somewhere which is rather odd or difficult to adhere to. And also, as you can see, these tapes are very stretchy. So just a small piece of the tape, goes a really long way. And what I'll do is that I'll just stick a piece of tape on the side of the tube, and then I just put it in wherever I want to, and it will glue to either the dried flowers or the wall or the inside wall of the container, and it will be very sturdy. And I really like the idea of this because it's so easy. And even, say for example, I've got a piece of driftwood that is just fallen out, I can even use this to stick my driftwood into the vase as well. The thing is, these tapes can even be reused, and it can even be washed. I haven't tried it yet, but so they claim that it can be washed. So I think this is going to be my very good friend for a while. So you just stick it on, and even if you have a piece that sticks out, something like this, you want to stick out, all you need to do is just to use the tape and tape it on. And if you don't like it, just remove the tape. And later on I'll show you, I've already put in my tubes here. The tube is actually filled with water, and it's been glued on with this nano tape. And I think, as a floral designer, we actually have used so many different products and so many different new products every year. And so I think, this is one of the best product that I've used for a long while, because it's so versatile. And it's actually very good because we can use tubes of glass tubes or plastic tubes for water retention, water reservoir, and not use any oasis, because the oasis is definitely on its way out because of environmental issues. So what we're going to do is that, we can think of new things, the Kanzen, the pin holder, the new frog, or anything, chicken wire, they think that chicken wire is something new, but obviously it's been around since day one. And so there we are. I have just glued in all my container into this metal container, and now we're just going to add water, and then we're just going to insert the lily of the valley. It's really sturdy. Now, lily of the valley, or they call it muguet in French, is actually a flower for the 1st of May. Wherever you go in France in the 1st of May, you see a lot of this muguet. And muguet has a lot of different meanings. It means full of promise, it means the purity of love, it means the start of spring. But I was in Slovenia one year, and they tell me the lily of the valley is actually the tear of the bride. So it actually has many different meanings. And I think, best to leave it up to you when it comes to cultural meanings and cultural interpretations of a certain flower material. But I think using different plant materials is forever interesting, and is very intellectually stimulating as well. And okay, so back to the flowers. I have already bunched up the lily of the valley. I removed some of the leaves. When you buy lily of the valleys, they either come in with roots or as cut flowers such as these. And I think, with the roots are slightly more expensive, and longevity wise, I think it doesn't really make any difference. It's very short-lived, but while it's alive and while it's blooming, the fragrance is to die for. And I have yet to find a perfume that completely replicates this gorgeous smell of lily of the valley. So Just gonna put it in there, make it nice, make it accessible, make it interesting. You know, that's my philosophy really. If you call it philosophy, you know, that's my mantra when it comes to flower design, is that I really want to do something that is accessible. People can do it, people can enjoy it at home, people can replicate it. It's not too difficult, and enjoyment is actually the first thing that comes into mind. I don't want to torment you with endless techniques or anything, but I think, you know, when we're talking about flower arranging, flowers really should come to the forefront. And so I'm just going to add in another bunch of Lily of the Valley here. One way of making Lily of the Valley last slightly longer is that, especially if you're in a hot place such as Singapore or Hong Kong, you basically put it in icy water, or basically or just put it in ice. The stem of it is just arrange it in ice and let the ice cubes melt. And I think that's the best way of prolonging the life of the Lily of the Valley. So all these flowers are in tubes, coming out from the dried and gnawed stems of the lataris, and it actually gives a very interesting texture and a contrast between wilted and alive, as well as something that is winter as well as spring. Just gonna put it in my last tubes here. I'm just gonna put this away, and I'm just gonna put it on a turntable for you to see. Now it's finished, and you can see the sturdiness of the container is actually being contrasted very well with the dried lataris, as well as the dainty and ultimately delicate and fragrant Lily of the Valley. And with that, it finishes my demonstration today. I hope you enjoy it, and a big congratulations to Singapore Flower Club on behalf of the Hong Kong Flower Club. I'm Solomon, and I hope you would enjoy this, and wishing everybody good health and stay safe.